so we can just wing this easy clap. And as much as it's very easy to just fall into negativity when you don't like where the game is headed and you want to vent your frustration, and that resonates with a lot of people, today I want to talk about where the game might be headed in a more positive way, and I want to talk about the future of Overwatch with the one and only, who does not need an introduction, Freedo. Yeah, what are you doing, man?
AKA Mr. Positivity.
Mr. Positivity, right
I have
here.
never criticized a new feature or item into the game the next day. Wait, I do that every time. I can try to be positive, though. I'm sure there's plenty of positive things to say.
Gotta answer the call. Fuck.
Smoke weed.
The moment I hit the fucking record button, fucking doorbell, I ordered a chair. The chair's here now, great.
Weed.
You know what? I'm tired of long intros. Hey, today we're talking about the future of Overwatch with Freedo, who, you have the small indie channel, YourOverwatch, right? YourOverwatch, my Overwatch.
New startup.
New startup.
We're just getting things started. Be sure you guys go down and subscribe. Every sub matters.
Support small streamers. It's always very important. This is so
hey man, we started out
stupid.
small like everybody else, you know? Like it's
right.
easy to look at a channel and be like, wow, they must have got there overnight, but
It never
it's
works
like
like that.
this is how success works. You have 10 years of failure, and then overnight you figure it out and you start doing things right. So that's some good life advice for you.
Exactly. And I think that's better than the first intro I had before the fucking doorbell rang. Whatever. Today we're going to talk about the future of Overwatch, and it is my belief that a big part of the future of Overwatch is competitive play. And I think that, who was that? Summit1G on stream said the other day that for successful games, casual and competitive has to go together. People think of them like mutually exclusive, where, well, Overwatch is a casual game, that's why pushing Overwatch League doesn't make sense, but they kind of need each other. You need the competitive side to keep the core community interested, because competition is what keeps people interested, and the casual side to, well, finance the whole thing essentially and keep the viewer numbers up and the sponsors happy and all that kind of stuff. So I want to talk about the future of Overwatch in the sense that what can be done first and foremost to improve competitive play, to subsequently make people more interested in the high end, the Overwatch League, the pro play, and see if this is even doable. So what I have done here is I have some bullet points about what I think are some simple improvements for competitive play, and I just want to know what you think about them. Sound good?
Okay.
Okay.
I'll give you a grading scale. Feature Freedo today.
Don't hold back on that. I know that some of these ideas might be a little bit out there, but I think they're largely rooted in reason, I want to say. So, I think that by now we have reached a point where ranked is too diluted, that we cannot segregate casual players out of ranked play anymore. So instead we need a new competitive mode. We need a hardcore competitive mode, kind of like Call of Duty does it, but not in the same way that you die by one shot, but in the sense that we find a place for the hardcore competitive players who want to further the competition. Okay, so the bullet points go as follow. We increase the minimum level for competitive entry. So first off, instead of level 25, we can think of, 50, 75, 100 to make sure that the players who enter have a lot of experience. Number 2, certain amount of hours played on every hero should be required to understand the point of view of players who do not fall into your category, because it's easy to think that as a DPS or healer, you know everything, but you need the perspective of all the roles to understand what is going on, which is why this should also be a requirement. Mandatory SMS-enabled account. You need SMS Protect on your account. It's just a barrier to entry to make sure people don't join it on a whim, and also mandatory voice channel participation. I know some people don't like it, some people think it's useless, but in hardcore competitive, another barrier to entry needs to be theirs to make sure that people have a difference between quick play and what is essentially now quick play plus, and have a real competitive game mode. Furthermore, a seasonal map rotation of 1 to 2 maps per game mode that changes, and I think it can work really well since the seasons in Overwatch are very short anyway. A ban phase at the start of the game, like what Jane is doing right now, and more harsh punishments for repeated disconnects.
Okay. How many hours do we have to discuss each and every item? Okay. Here's the thing. I like a lot of those ideas, but the thing is, the reason why, when you look at a guy like Seagull who made his video and didn't give any solutions, really, that's respected among a lot of people. I mean, I personally love to give solutions, but the reason why people like that approach is because it allows you to speak conceptually about things. So I think what I would like to do in response is try to tease out where the concepts are that you're trying to address with some of these different solutions to see if we actually can reasonably even expect Overwatch to go that way. So first and foremost, I think is something that, and I've watched all your conversations on the channel, so I will try my best not to repeat things that other people have said. You just had Metro on, who I think did a really good job explaining a lot of this. But when you use the term quick play plus, I don't want to say I've patented that, but I think I come up with that, I'm pretty sure. And to me, people don't treat that term as much of an insult as it should be. Like when I came up with it, calling it quick play plus, it's not this like endearing, it's okay. It feels good to be playing it. You can relax after work or whatever. It's a terrible thing to call a competitive mode. It's a joke of a mode and an embarrassment. So the reason why we're even asking for another thing to come out, I think if I heard you right, you're talking about Call of Duty has like game battles, or CSGO has ESEA and Face It, or some other third-party option to this, is that there is a split between casual and actual hardcore. And does Overwatch even have to go into that mode where they're segmenting the community even further to a separate mode, which we could, debate the ins and outs of? Like, is that a team queue mode? Is it tournaments? Is it, whatever? The core problem here is that the mode that we were given, and every single action that Blizzard has taken in order to try to hone the mode and cultivate it and set rules for the community, has enabled a casual mindset. And realistically, unrealistically, I suppose is the best word to use, Blizzard has an approach where they attempt to make everyone be able to do whatever they want at all times, which I think very easily should be obviously impossible to do. Where you just think about a group of friends deciding where to go to dinner. Can everyone get what they want at the same time? Like, there's just, what situation does this even work, right? And I think recently, I don't know if you saw this most recent blow up between Samito and Fuey. One player who's an aspiring pro, another player who is, utterly casual playing ranked in his own way, one tricking Torb, causing a lot of headaches for people who want ranked mode to really emulate the Overwatch League, or at least some sort of lesser version of it to at least feel more competitive. And all of these different types of players are competing at once. So I said 10 years worth of stuff there to sort of lay out and try to progress this conversation in a way where we're not debating every single type of rule set. The issue is, ultimately, ranked is quick play plus. It is accommodating for the Fuey 500s of the world. And the problem that competitive players, I don't know where you fall in this, but for myself or pro players as well, the truth is, if casuals get what they want in a competitive rule set, it devalues the competition, because all of a sudden now, I think the best way to explain it is, if you're in your backyard playing basketball with a friend who's equal size of you and same age, right? And it's a real close game. Then all of a sudden, your little brothers have to get involved somehow, right? Okay, now you're playing a 2v2 with this 2 foot nothing, whatever, shrimp kid that you have to figure out how to make sure you pass him the ball now. You see what I'm saying? It's this awkward, just annoyance where we're like, well, everyone has to figure out how to play with Torb. And if you get mad about playing with Torb, we're going to slap you on the wrist. And these are the rules that Blizzard have set out. And one little small extra rant to the tail end of this before I let you go. I have come to grips with this being the reality of what Blizzard wants to do, and I have some theories on why they want to do it. But, for example, when I interviewed Scott Mercer, who I think largely is responsible for these systems, a lot of my fans were kind of upset with me that I didn't grill him or debate him on the spot when he comes up with a lot of these casual answers. And maybe if given a second chance, I may have been more strict and not even got to some of the answers that we got later in the interview and stopped him like 2 minutes in when he started talking about how ranked is essentially casual. But this is the decision they've made. Like, no amount of me arguing with them or making more videos in this light, unfortunately, not to draw our conversation here to be completely futile, but they know this point of view very well. Like they invented StarCraft. Like they understand what a hardcore esport is. They very distinctly are going down this pro casual way of things in order to attempt to appeal to players that don't want to be hardcore. I don't know if that's working for them. Maybe that's even a better conversation to have. This is even a smart strategy, but this is the one that they have defended up until this point, and I don't necessarily see it changing too much until the gears really we're barely even getting roll queue tested. You know what I mean? Like they're testing it now. We might get it, but it's 3 years down the line. You know what I mean? They were confidently set in their ways, but I think the numbers at least are showing them that they have to change something. But I don't know if it's all of a sudden we're getting actual ranked mode anytime soon. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope there was something logical and coherent in all of that mess, 10-minute rambling, but
I think a lot of what you said is very accurate. I watched that interview as well. I'm gonna link it in the card because I really think people should see that. Because when I saw that interview, I was a little pissed off at first, but it was also eye-opening in the sense that it made me stop hoping. And that sounds negative, and it kind of is, but at the same time makes me realize all this anger and frustration I have about our current rank mode is like, it's not worth getting mad over because Blizzard is fine with what it is. And I've seen this video from Game Theory, laugh at it at you one, where they talked about Fortnite and why it's so addicting. And one core design philosophy behind games like that is making players feel like they're above average. And I feel like Overwatch has done a really good job of doing that, especially around the time it launched, because it is team-based, and eventually over time people realize how frustrating team-based games can be when somebody doesn't work with them, but the way the heroes were designed in this like rock, paper, scissor-y kind of nature, with still a lot of outplay at the start, and the fact that ultimates exist and ultimates are so powerful, made people feel like even when they were, from a pro player's perspective or a high-ranked player's perspective, complete garbage, these players still felt above average. And eventually, where that was a big success for them because a lot of people liked the game as a result of that because it felt great, now it's backfiring. Because everyone thinks they're above average, even when they're below average, and nobody wants to admit any faults, and the game never goes out of its way to tell them that they are at fault. And nobody learns the game, and as you said yourself, it has propagated almost this like casual playstyle and mentality, where that is the big reason why I don't think that ranked is ever going to be able to really be ranked. And this is why I think we need a new game mode. And now what Metro said in the discussion we had the other week, where it seems like Blizzard is panicking a bit, and I feel like that is right. Like, they make a lot of very questionable decisions as a result of the players leaving. And I don't think that it's unfair to say that players are leaving in the face of these reactions of like, hey, let's throw out all this stuff really quickly, let's try to give them some changes to make them feel like it's getting better. And I think they see the problem now. I think it's a system that at the start worked really well for them, of this like casual competitive clusterfuck almost, and now they realize, wait, the people who actually are competitive are leaving, and we don't know if we are fine with that. And I think this is what they're exploring right now.
So maybe we could try to get back to some of your suggestions and even seeing how these even can be implemented. The issue I have with a separate mode is that Blizzard really doesn't want to split the queue, and there's benefits to that in that the SR system will be more accurate. The problem is we actually have a very accurate SR system, but a completely illegitimate game experience, if that makes sense. So for the game that we have, your SR is actually very accurate. And this is something that we've tried to discuss on the channel a bit recently, but people really don't understand how accurate it is. And it feels like everyone around you at all times is an idiot, but they're actually very mechanically similar to you based on how well it tracks those metrics. And I've never seen a gold player who I'm like, man, if this guy was in my master's lobby, he would fit right in. It's like, it doesn't happen because of the way the SR adjustment system does work. The problem is Blizzard sees those metrics and they see fairness, right? But I've always been against fairness. I think that's really weird, anti-political way to say it. But I think fairness is anti-competition, actually. If you focus on fairness rather than competition, and I guess that's probably the best word to use to describe it, then you start to whittle away the fun of the game and like why you play it. So, for example, if we focus more on two teams being fair in terms of SR, we maybe sacrifice like the roles being right. Would you rather have a balanced team with maybe SR a little bit, skewed, or actually be able to play the role you queued for? Do you know what I mean? Like, these are the type of sacrifices that I think the dev team are looking at making right now, if I had to guess. And to that point, I think when I hear you guys say that Blizzard are panicking, I think you may not realize how slow things move over there. Like, for them to even be willing to discuss with me the ranked mode, which I don't think is an interview we would have got a year ago, they would have been evaluating this, I would say, from about 4 to 6 months ago. Like, BlizzCon to me was nice in terms of where they're moving with the content they have behind the scenes, but it's not like a couple months ago thing. It's like they've definitely been testing these things over and over. They always have this really funny way of acting like they'll never give you that thing you're asking for, and then all of a sudden flipping on a dime and then giving it to us anyway, right? This is what happened with Unlimited Pick, for example. I think it's likely going to happen with some form of role queue. And you mentioned bans. I think bans are utterly essential for the health of the game. But when you do that, we're starting to take a jump into the hardcore sector of what competitive is. And if that's the case, you queue in, you see you have FUE 500 on your team, somebody's going to ban Torb. They're just going to do that. And it's not just for FUE, it's for every player, right, who might be known or maybe has Mercy one trick in their gamer tag or something, right? And people want to troll them or, make the game harder for them. We have to be willing to say, this is a competitive experience and sacrifices have to be made. Like, sacrifices have to be made somewhere. The philosophy of giving everyone what they want all the time serves no one. And I'm excited to see when they actually start making those cuts. I don't know where they'll be, but that's where the tension is. So I don't think we're going to get an entirely separate mode that's not within the boundaries of how they've been operating or what their goals are for the ranked mode. And I also don't think it's going to be largely competitive. I'm hoping, though, that some compromises are made in order to satisfy the audience that still exists, because I think the majority of the casuals are gone. They're playing Fortnite. And so that's dev for the team, for the players that exist, who are at least slightly more competitive, if not all the way hardcore, sweaty, try hard.
I just think because obviously somebody like me does not have the insight that you have and the connection, so to speak. I mean, even if it takes like 6 months to get a conversation with the dev, at the end of the day, you had a conversation with the dev, right? So for me, who's somebody like who's in large, just a regular player that happens to have a YouTube channel, it seems like these kinds of sacrifices we talk about here are never going to be implemented because they value the casual experience too much, because they've said time and time again they want people to be able to play whatever they want to play at every point in time. So the logical conclusion to somebody like me, and perhaps a lot of the people who watch this video, is that the only way to satisfy both of these types of players is to have ranked mode where people can just go in without caring and get their competitive gold weapons and stuff like that, and then have a real hardcore competitive mode at the side where these sacrifices are made without compromising the experience of players who are already used to the I play whatever I want kind of way. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, I wanted solo queue in the first 2 months of Rank coming out. I mean, we didn't like just about half of the systems that are implemented in Rank from the get-go. We knew these problems existed and have complained about it from day one. So I'm on board with wanting that with you. I'm not exactly sure we're going to get it, but perhaps I'm really excited about the idea of timed events for like team queue modes, or because the problem is if they put in like a team queue mode in the arcade, that's not exactly what we want, right? Like, we want actual try hard ranked with, but what does that even look like? Like, you say, for example, forced voice chat, but that's an impossibility in my mind. I don't think you can force randoms to join voice chat. What I would like is just grouping to not be punished in any way, shape, or form. There's no downside at all. And in order for that to happen, the sacrifice on the altar of team play succeeding in the game is that smaller groups have to play against bigger groups more often, unfortunately. And the thing is, to me, in other games that I've played, that was just a given, like an expectation. Instead, I think what they're going to ultimately save is the player who doesn't join voice chat and that just wants to play their one hero. I think what they're going to have to realize is that means ranked mode needs a lot more structure put into it. And even if that means the freedom to pick whatever you want, for example, if there is a role queue, it probably has to be locked in order for it to work at all to some degree. Maybe there's flex slots or something. We can always debate the minutia of that, but there's got to be some limitation and in order to be able to set up expectations, right? So like some teammates can't do everything so that other people can do that, fill the void and fill the other roles. And that's what the community wants. And instead of focusing on that, thus far, we've had, well, everyone can experience the game as you want if you go to the work, if you do the work to do so. So, for example, if we want players in team chat, if we want to have all the roles filled, if we want to be able to play the heroes we want to play, Blizzard's answer is use a team, right? And the thing is, like, there's 100 reasons why people don't do that, but that's the way they see it, right? So ultimately, solo queue is always going to be dictated by those who, have play styles that people don't want to play around, but you have to. So if you play that way, we're just always going to have to deal with that until end of time, I think. I don't think that's something they're going to shift on, unfortunately. So yeah, I don't know where Blizzard budges on any of these things, unfortunately. So I would like to say, like, well, the future's bright and everything's going to be better. But the good news is we do know that they have delayed guilds, which means, and that's what Scott Mercer said in the interviews, are his words, which means that they've been working on them. And I think maybe they got delayed in order to figure out their role queue solution first, because as everybody knows now, LFG was kind of a band-aid solution, unfortunately, because it wasn't hard to see. I mean, as I said earlier, I knew, unfortunately, that as soon as it came out, well, people are going to try grouping for the first time, get into it, realize the games are better, but harder. So then don't do it. And that's really unfortunate. The only way I really play the game is in groups nowadays. And it's not much, but you got to jump through 1,000 hoops to do it, which is unfortunate.
I think Blizzard's approach, I mean, even in that interview, they said that if you want this like very strict way of playing what I think, for lack of a better term, you and I would call it proper competitive, that they advise to custom games and that we should set up our own tournaments and stuff. And I think that's a really bad approach of doing that, because obviously they as game designers know that incentives need to be in place. And the reason that people play competitive is because of the incentives that are there. And for them to say that, hey, essentially, if you want real competition, go make your own games. Sure, some people are going to do that, but most people are not going to. Because it's just, as you said, you have to jump through 1,000 hoops to make that happen. And I feel like they might underestimate what the competitive player base really wants. Now, I'm wondering what you think about this, because we obviously have a lot of discussions surrounding, one-tricking, two-tricking versus flex playing. And do you think that the competitive player base in large, in the face of the issues that we have right now, would still benefit from a stricter set of rules, including something like role queue, even though we know that most of these players are likely prone to only playing very few characters?
Yeah, I mean, any restrictions is a step forward, and in combination with that, having one ban per team, we know basically solves the meta instantly. Because I can go into why that is, but effectively, any strat that would be incredibly obnoxious to play on a map, you ban the key hero to that strat, and all of a sudden, it's less optimized. The power creep is cut down a bit, and then more things can be played. All of a sudden, another. Like the tier 2 strats are always wider than this shallow tier 1 strat. So you start to pluck away at that. All of a sudden, a bunch more options open up. I think structure and reliability is all the player base really wants for solo queue. I don't necessarily even really sympathize too much with the solo queue experience, because that's never what I personally wanted. I always wanted the team game to enable team play and have a place for team play to succeed. Unfortunately, Blizzard's attitude to that is, well, you can play team play, but we're going to try our best to make sure that you don't earn SR off of the players who only want to play solo queue chaos mode. And to me, that's misalignment of incentives, right? Like it's basically biasing the more chaotic, bad way of playing the game, frankly, and then all of a sudden not rewarding team play, which should succeed in the matchmaker. People really don't understand that. And I think often, I'm sure people in the comments are even going to say this as well, they just start shaking in their boots when they think of six stacks having to play smaller groups, not realizing the macro effect that it has on the SR economy, if you will, where it enforces team play to be required to move up another level. Whereas in the system we have now, almost nobody groups anyway. So you're always going, like, the most success I see in ranked is leaving voice chat and then just picking wonky stuff. And a lot of it is dropping the knowledge I have of team play altogether. Trying to do team play gets you killed, basically, in Overwatch. It's far more effective if you can do it, but it backfires tremendously if you try to do it and fail. So the meta of ranked turns into solo queue and solo carry, which isn't what the game is. So you have a matchmaker that's designed to enable a playstyle that really doesn't exist and rewards it, yet we all know the game should be played differently. So to me, when people start worrying about the rule set to try to get ranked to play differently, that's kind of at the core of it at all times in the back of my mind, where realistically we're trying to form a game that's really requires team play to somehow work without it, and it just doesn't, unfortunately. So we got to make compromises at the end of the day. Whatever restrictions are required in order to get it to at least emulate some sort of reliability, I think need to be made yesterday. The point is, the conflict has to happen in the game. So if you split these queues apart, where you effectively already have a team queue, but they fight for the same SR, all I want is for these same players to come into conflict with the same meta of gameplay, basically. And yes, team play would have a bit of a bias, but the advantage it has is vastly overblown. It's mostly perceived, and the hard lessons you have to learn from playing up against the team is what teaches you the game, in other games anyway. And this doesn't have to be the only solution, but I think it's the only solution that actually works when you have a hybrid queue like we have, where everyone can join at any queue size and there's no limitations on that. Oddly enough, all the SR limitations they put in, I think, are a big detriment as well. I could go on down a rant about that. If you're in a full team, you should be able to play with whoever you want. I mean, that's how it works in other games, CSGO especially. If you have a gold Mercy player that you're trying to show the ropes of the game, she's your problem, right? Like, or he's your problem in that way. Because I understand if you get, like, in a 3Q, you don't want your randoms to be subjected to that. But if you're in a full team, you should be able to queue however you want. Every time I try to play in a 6, we have to do advanced algebra just to figure out who can queue with who. It's like, are you 500? Oh no, that account decayed. What MMR is it? It takes forever just to even figure out, and it's a big pain. And people just being faced with that or solo queue, people don't go to customs. They just leave, right? Like,
exactly.
They don't go through all this extra work to try to do the, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you can get the experience you want if you just jump through these 10,000 hoops. The other option, of course, is a far more regulated solo/duo queue, because I know a lot of people do want that, and they don't want to have to worry about the team play. I think it objectively makes the play better and makes all the ranks play better. And when you get to like Masters or something, you're not going to get a Ryan who just doesn't know how to press W at the right time or something, which frankly, the level of play at the quote unquote top 1%, it's just people still don't play the maps right. And when I say sentences like that, I think people often get really offended, and they're like, well, who are you to decide how maps are supposed to be played? It's not me making the decision, okay? I don't just make this up. I watch competitive play and know what does and doesn't work. And then when you see matchmaking filled with just bad play, that's just objectively bad, that it would not work against anyone who knows anything about the map, work, because both teams don't know what they're doing. It's just sad. It's sad and depressing. I wish I had a more happy spin to it, but that kind of play, I think people enjoy because it has less tension, right? Like a lot of people do want to have a more relaxed ranked mode, and that's usually how solo queue plays traditionally in other games as well. So perhaps we do need a split queue for that to work, but also, like I said, Blizzard hates that idea because they don't want to isolate the player base. But if I had my way, the real rank system would be what it was all along, or from the start, is the better way to say it. When they first came up with it, they're like, this probably needs to be a full 6-man queue. You were right, Blizzard. It did. And then a solo queue maybe off to the side. Like if you want to play solo queue and do your own thing, not join voice, one trick a character, whatever, do whatever you want, right? Because instead of having a good mode and then one that's a bit of a mess, but it's all you solo carrying yourself or duoing or whatever, we instead have a mixed one where grouping is punished, and realistically the best way to succeed in the ranked matchmaker is to devolve your play into that solo queue-esque playstyle. Because I wish I could get on comms and always feel like everyone's going to have a team experience, but that doesn't really happen until you start getting to lobbies with pro players. Like everywhere else, you're just arguing all the time or disagreeing, or people don't listen to calls anyway. Frankly, it feels like a waste of time to join voice chat, which I assume goes against your beliefs because you want forced voice chat. But to me, I've been conditioned to not even try anymore. The few times I do play solo queue, I'm a complete degenerate, and I try to pick what the team needs, but I only join voice chat if people ask me to. If they ask, I'll always join, but they almost never do, because there's like a stigma and a belief of like, we're not really here to have teamwork anyway, right? And because I only have so much strength in my heart to be let down by the game,
I only sad, dude.
I only can, you know what I mean? But like, I only can take so much of like going in, explaining the situation to the team, be like, all right, we got to do this, this, and this. I may study this game full time, 12 hours a day. I think I know what I'm talking about. Oh, and no one wants to listen. Everyone's arguing. We're finger pointing. That's too much of a headache for me. If I want to deal with that, I'll go with my own 6-stack, and it'll be me the one who's throwing and playing badly, and I got to fix my own game, right? Like that's the beauty of playing in an actual group where you have to be held accountable. And if we had that, we wouldn't need all these other things that they're trying to put in after the fact, match history and new stats. Those are all good, but you wouldn't need them as badly if players were actually held accountable for their play, which they never are, because you always can feel, it kind of goes back to what you said earlier, people feel like they're doing good because so much of the game, it gives you a feedback loop of you're doing the right thing. Whereas more likely than not, everything you're doing is probably wrong, right? I go back to my gold Hanzo or whoever example that you want to go through. They feel like they're playing perfect, and they're like, well, why didn't we win this game? I played perfect. Well, actually, like there's so many things you could improve that you probably should just ignore what you think your team's doing wrong, because Overwatch is a way harder game than people give it credit for. I think it's probably one of the hardest games ever made, and people think it's like casual Call of Duty or something, and it's not.
I always have to shake my head when I see comments of people saying that, Overwatch is an inherently casual game, and comments saying that Blizzard willingly makes this a casual game and there's no point about me bitching that it should be more competitive in the competitive game mode. Quite frankly, if they wanted this to be an inherently casual game, they wouldn't have the Overwatch League. They wouldn't push the game as an esports if they thought that there was nothing competitive about it. And I've also played in 6-stacks, and honestly, 6-stacking is like one of the best experiences I've ever had. And I don't even play in Grandmaster or Master in my 6-stack. I was playing Plat DPS with my other Platinum friends, and we're having the best time of our lives because we're playing the game properly. And we learned from it, and we got so much better as a result. And so many people think that, well, if you take a mix of people like, let's say, Diamond, Platinum, Gold players all together, then the Gold player is going to get boosted up the ranks because these 6 have coordination. They are in Discord. It's so much easier for them to win the game when, relative to matchmaking, this is not what's happening anyway. But people are so concerned about this idea of this guy stacking just got into my rank and now I have to deal with him in solo queue, that they completely discard the idea of like, hey, this is a team-based game, and this player probably learned how to play in a team. Sometimes I get really frustrated with reading these comments when it comes to competitive versus casual, which has led me to believe that segregating that is like the only way to go. And forcing voice chat is just one of those parts where I think there just needs to be a barrier to entry. the whole like SMS protect thing, the having to join voice chat thing. I don't care if ranked stays right now how it is and people farm their gold weapons how they want, as long as there's like a hardcore alternative that has a huge barrier to entry. And I think hero bans are part of that, because if you think about other games like, let's say, Rainbow Six Siege, the time investment of a casual versus competitive round of Rainbow Six Siege is so massive that every troll that wants to ruin your game has to think really hard about if they want to do that. But if you think about Overwatch, one competitive game is like the length of 2 quick play games. It's not a massive time investment. There's not a lot of barriers to entry. And this is why we have so many, trolls and leavers and people who don't care and people who just want, plus all the people who just want to play the one hero, people who just want to farm their gold guns and all that stuff. We have so many different people in this one game mode, all fighting about how the game should be played, when there is, as you said, an objective way of how to play the game properly, which, the pros show us. There's ways to play the map, there's ways to play compositions and stuff.
Well, to be fair, it like gets brought out with that experience, right? I think people, when we say things like that, they assume what we're saying is they already know, but it has to be tested, right? And
Yes.
and once an idea is tested for long enough, you can be pretty certain, like staying at the low ground on Dorado choke while Junkrat spams without taking any other ground is probably a bad idea. But yet 3 years in, people still do that, right?
Yeah.
Or they don't know even where to go on the map, much less what to pick, right? Like there's the shooter game of how to take the space of the map, and then there's the meta game of hero selection, and neither really seems to be grasped much, other than people holding tabs, seeing a hero they don't like or a gold damage medal they think they shouldn't have, and using that to debate things, which, yeah, I don't know if forcing voice chat on randoms is ever going to work, but I definitely do want a hardcore mode. From now on, I think I'm never going to refer to ranked as ranked. I'm just going to call it quick play plus. And when you say hardcore ranked, I just want a real ranked mode. I just want ranked. Let's have ranked. Right now we have quick play plus, which is lots of fun, right? You can go in there, one trick, whatever hero you want. I think I'm going to decide I'm going to learn sim and not join voice. It's going to be a great time. I have a great week. A lot of people are going to hate me, but like I get to do that in that mode. But we do need an actual mode if that is going to be the state of expectations that people have in the game. And I think the only people left realistically do expect the worst. And that, playing a hero that's designed to be niche all of the time is inherently griefing, I think is fair to say. Samito made that argument. And it basically is. Just despite whether or not that's your best hero or whatever, it's not a competitive mindset. So calling the mode ranked or competitive or whatever, it's false advertisement as far as I'm concerned. I do want a real mode. I think I don't know if they're going to split the queue and make it permanent, but at the very least, I'd love to see weekend tournaments or other ways where there's something between ranked and open division for us to play that is actually serious. And the problem is, if you make a new mode that's solo queue friendly, like it probably has to replace the one we have now, unless it's a team mode. And then the one we have now gets restricted to like solo duo queue, which I think a lot of people want and would be a solution that I would be fine with.
And I do agree with you that it's kind of false advertising to call ranked as is right now competitive play. But I do still think they need to keep the name simply for the sake of like, the feel-good mechanic. The whole like people want to feel like, hey, I'm playing competitive and I'll see how well I'm doing against other people and this shows my skill. Just to, as shitty as that sounds, fool them into believing they're actually playing competitive without actually playing competitive, because that's a lot of players anyway. And then you have the, call it hardcore competitive for the sake of, barrier to entry, making people scared of that mode who do not care about the competition.
I mean, and that's fair, because there is I don't think FUE 500 shouldn't have a place to play. Like, just give them a mode, but I don't think it should be the main mode. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I don't think it should be the premier. All right, you play this, and if you get high enough, you could potentially get into an open division team. Like, whoa, wait a second. No. The ranked is not a path, not a part of the path to pro. I think it's a path to throw. It's the mode you go in to just randomly do whatever you want, right?
Yes,
and that's okay for if that's what it is. And that's kind of what I was getting into with the interview with Scott, where I believe the way I phrased it was something like, as long as you have the expectations of it being casual, essentially,
Mhm.
you're going to get what it's
You get what you pay
designed to
for.
do. Yeah, like you're going to get the experience they have built for you. But the moment you're trying to take it a bit more seriously, it lets you down and breaks your heart, which is why we need another mode. Have we exhausted this line of reasoning? Is there other things that we want to cover?
I think I'm wondering. Obviously, we're kind of beating this dead horse here, talking about competitive play. But another thing that I want to talk about is what do you think? How much the update cycle of Overwatch matters in keeping the future bright, as to speak? Because there's people that argue against something that I say. When I say we don't need more heroes, we need our heroes to be working properly, and the same goes for maps. I would like to see more maps reworked. I would like to see more heroes reworked to work better in the game that we have right now than adding more variables. But people say because heroes are the only actual content that we get next to maps, which arguably I don't even count as great content pieces, we need more of them to keep players engaged. What do you think about that?
I don't think I agree. I'd say I wish we had a functional ranked experience first. to me, and I know we were trying to get off that point, but like to me, that's the real golden goose. Because if that works, no matter what the meta is, people will have a better time because they can go at it in with expectations. Most of the frustration I don't think comes down to the meta. I think it comes down to the method that you have to play the game in and the rule set that it gives you. And no matter, it seems like you split down two roads. Like, am I going to jump through the hoops to play 6-stack, have a harder games, or am I going to play solo queue and have a headache a big percentage of the time? And that's always the case, no matter what meta we're in. Further, with people thinking that balancing faster is somehow going to have a better effect, I don't think they realize the severe boom or bust cycle that every competitive game goes in. And there's no way for Overwatch really to escape it. There's always going to be the best support hero that the game's kind of bounced around. There's going to be the easiest route to value somewhere, right? So I think there was a very skillful dive meta for a long time. And I mean, specifically Tracer Genji dive. You couldn't really punish Tracer's movement, right? Dominated the game for a long time, but it was skillful, but not a lot of hero diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you get into eras where like Mercy was really prominent, and a lot of the support players didn't like it because they don't want to have to play Mercy, but you did. And the upside of that to me was we got to see a ton of Widowmaker, which is a hero that I'll watch all the time. A lot of people didn't like the Widow Tracer top meta. But to me, especially, I think it was the stage 3 of Overwatch League, the competitive meta for the online servers was the best it ever was. I felt like you could play just about every hero in the game, despite the pros only playing a limited set of them. And to that degree, it's hard for us to realize how the entire community absorbs a patch. So, for example, with the one we have now, we would say Brigida's pretty obviously too good and is causing for the competitive meta to be kind of stale, frankly. Despite Goats actually taking a lot more skill than people think and blah, blah, blah. It's not as fun to watch. There's no Widowmaker barely and high skill heroes like that. But casual players at much lower ranks don't really feel like Brigida's much different than like Lock On Sim or something. I think it's very easy for us as either higher ranked players or people who focus too much at the higher levels to be blinded by how they absorb the benefits or weaknesses of a patch. And because of that, not everyone can be happy all the time. It's physically not possible because there was an era of time, the dive meta, where supports had to be incredibly mechanically skilled to even have a chance to survive up against dive. And then it flipped the other way, where supports are incredibly rigorous against these dive characters. And it's always going to have that boom or bust cycle that you just sort of have to accept to be the case. It's not possible for them to balance everything equally all the time. And if you balance things faster, we would just go on these boom or bust cycles even quicker, and it would be radical and more changes would be needed. That's the reason why they try a couple changes at once, see what that does, and then get data to review. And I prefer the way they do it now. I just think some things are kind of blatantly obvious to me, like why does a support need to be able to one-shot a DPS? Kind of problematic. Why does Valk, like the whole Valk thing was obvious from 10 miles away because we knew how Mercy functioned at the pro level already. Not to bore you, everyone, with the details, but even when she had mass res, people would use res for 1 or 2 mans anyway to tempo out fights. So the idea that they gave her 3 tempo reses potentially in a row,
God.
it was so patently obvious that was OP. But generally, beyond these blemishes of like a few bad ideas, generally I think the balance is quite good in Overwatch and is way worse in other games. I think if people spent more time in other games, they would realize how much better Overwatch is balanced and how that's kind of a non-issue. Speeding up hero cycles would be fun. I think that's probably fine. That kind of adds elements of chaos to the game that will force the meta to change quicker. But there also is the problem that, as we've said earlier in the discussion here, players don't really know how to play the game now, including pro players, by the way. A new patch comes out, they play their same old for a little bit, see if that works, and then they kind of have to be forced to play something else by, testing things out, right? They don't just know the patch immediately, and that's kind of the problem of playing on new patches. I mean, if you were an NYXL fan in the playoffs, I think you know too well how patches can just ruin a team, and that's kind of the issue, and it happens in ranked as well. Do you really want that type of volatility where you learn a play style and all of a sudden it gets robbed from you every few months? That doesn't feel good either. And I think I would debate that even feels worse. And so balancing quicker and adding more heroes more rapidly does that worse. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
So adding heroes quicker and balancing quicker is not the solution in your eyes. What do you think has to be done? Do you think we need more pieces of content to especially keep the casual players engaged who do not care about what is meta and which heroes are good or not, who don't even touch competitive play?
Well, I don't know if I'm an expert on what casual players want and what keeps them around. To me, I don't think a high percentage of casuals are around anyway. I heard this as an offhand remark somewhere. I can't remember where to attribute it, but I think it was said at BlizzCon at some point, either in an interview or privately or something, but the player base of quick play is now lower than ranked. Now, don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the case now. And with that being the case, I don't think that there just is this overwhelming casual market that we can even tap into. I think Overwatch largely lost it and should focus on being more of a competitive game where it has a reputation like CSGO. Like, to a new player coming right into Overwatch right now, what do we really want to give them? Do we want to give them, this is a very rewarding competitive experience that you're going to have to study a little bit and try and work at, but it'll give back what you put in? Or do we need immediate gratification, new stuff, shiny, new things to do? I that's okay, but for me, Overwatch always ideally is this competitive experience that we were looking for. And I don't necessarily think new shiny things helps in that regard. Instead, I always want systems and infrastructure.
Yeah, that's very interesting for sure. I mean, I have largely given up on competitive play. When I do play it, I largely do treat it like Quick Play Plus, which is most of the people that I come across and just play whatever I want, not even joining voice chat. And I mean, I agree to the extent of when I play Overwatch, I enjoy just the gratification of getting back what I put in. Like, for example, when I watched the League and I really felt like practicing Genji, I felt rewarded getting better at Genji, and that was kind of good enough for me. But I do know that a lot of people, they kind of need that shiny, like the argument of we need more heroes comes up over and over again, not because people are asking for meta shakeups, at least not in the comments I have read, but because that is the only kind of content we get. And I guess with me not really having the outlook for, I guess, what casual players want, and neither do you, when you're more interested in systems and system improvements and competitive play, I guess this is where anyone watching can leave a comment. Do you consider yourself a casual player, and what do you think the game needs, considering you were sticking around for like almost an hour worth of competitive discussion, which I don't know why you would do as a casual player, but I appreciate it anyway. And after that long time of talking, all I can say is thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Freedo. And where can people find you?
Thanks for having me on, man. Oh, sorry, you asked where we could find.
Because
Your
obviously
Overwatch,
you
the
have a
YouTube channel.
small indie channel that not a lot of people know, so I thought I'm gonna give you a platform to plug your channel.
I really appreciate that, Cliff.
No problem.
Our link will be in the description. Your Overwatch. We make all sorts of content for every type of player. We do things for casuals as well, obviously, but the main thing that I do on the channel is competitively minded usually. So guides, analysis, discussion, and we'll cover the news as well. So hopefully it's everything you could need outside of Cliff's ranting and ravings over here on this one.
Yo, I do more than just rant. Don't put me in that box, excuse you. Anyway, it was fun having you here. Thank you everyone so much for watching as well. Don't forget to subscribe, and hope to see you guys next time.